Hello, my name is Susan. I'm here to discuss Joanne's symptoms, her diagnostic process, and her disease progression. My education background, I went to the University of Tulsa and studied nursing. I graduated there with a Bachelor of Science in Nursing, and I've now been practicing nursing for over 25 years.
Joanne Huber was born February 27, 1942 in Wayne, Missouri, to parents Lorraine and Joseph Huber. As a young child, she moved from Wayne to Littleton, Colorado with her mother and father and younger brother Jerry. During her childhood, she helped raise her younger brother and baby sister Jolene. During her senior year of high school, she met the love of her life, Don McMorrine, and they married June 17, 1961, then moved to San Francisco, and a year later moved to Indiana. Two years after marriage, they had their first child, Mark, and then their second son, Dean, 2 years after. Not long after Dean was born, she found that she had a displaced kidney and soon went in to have the kidney operated on. She had an unremarkable medical history for the most of her life, except for the displaced kidney. Other than being a mother to her 2 children, she worked a few small jobs and acted in the local theater group. After her 2 sons graduated from high school and moved out to go to college, she held small jobs, and her husband moved cities but remained in the state of Indiana. In the late 1980s, she became a grandmother, and her last grandchild was born in 1997. 7 years after the birth of her last grandchild, and after 42 years of marriage, her husband unexpectedly passed away. 3 years after Don died, she married a man named Ralph. Early on in their marriage, she had 2 small medical issues which required surgery on her foot and on her shoulder. During their marriage, she started showing symptoms such as crying easily, laughing inappropriately, and shortness of breath. Within a few months of these symptoms, some family members noticed that she had also had slurred speech. At this point, she started seeking medical attention for her vocal issues. She went to several ear, nose, and throat surgeons to try and find the cause of her slurred, raspy voice and was diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia.
Joanne's very first symptoms were crying easily. She was having some inappropriate laughter, some shortness of breath. But the first symptoms that really led her to the first ENT specialist was some slurred speech. Her son specifically noticed she was having slurred speech and called and talked to her other son, and then they both called and talked to her and her husband and really encouraged her. And she went to the first ENT specialist, and with that slurred speech and the other symptoms of the laughing inappropriately, crying easily, the first diagnosis from that ENT specialist was spasmodic dysphonia. Spasmodic dysphonia is difficulty speaking due to spasms. The spasms are the dystonia of the muscles that control the vocal cords. The vocal cords, as air is pushed through, have the spasms, and that's what makes the range of the voice sound slurred or mostly slurred and almost like it's as if they're drunk sounding.
Prior to undergoing the recommended procedure of Botox injections in her vocal cords for the spasmodic dysphonia, she sought the opinion of another physician.
The first ENT specialist that Joanne went to see knew that she was having the muscles in the larynx, the spasms of the voice box. It's what that is. What happens is the signals from your brain go to your nerves, and then those signals from the nerves go to your muscles. And in that, they get mixed up. The wrong type of signals are sent, and that's what causes the spasms of the larynx. What Botox does, Botox is a biological product, and you inject it into the muscles around the voice box. It blocks the nerve signals, and therefore by blocking those nerve signals down that chain, the signals are no longer getting there, and that reduces the spasms that are happening in the voice box.
The physician sent her to a neuron surgeon, and more testing was pursued. Testing involved ruling out other diseases for the symptoms that she had.
After going to the ENT specialist and knowing that the next procedure Joanne was going to have was the Botox injection, she decided to go and seek a neurosurgeon's advice. And when she went there, he basically told her that the process for diagnosing what she had would be to look at several neuromuscular diseases, and of those are multiple sclerosis, ALS, and then also even the potential for a brain tumor. So because of the way her symptoms were, he felt that it could have been any of these, and even the spasmodic dysphonia was still there, but now it is being seen more of a symptom of possibly something else. So the neurosurgeon decides he needs to do a lot of testing, and because there's no one specific test that can rule out it's a brain tumor, it's ALS, it's multiple sclerosis. So in doing that, he had to do a lot of things. The first, and it's basically a process of ruling out, do a test and rule out. So he did an MRI of her brain and spine to check out the structures there. He did a creatinine kinase, which is a blood test, and that rules out any potential for any muscle tissue injury from other diseases. Muscle biopsies are used for other muscle disorders as well. He did nerve conduction studies to see how her nerves were working. He did respiratory testing, and that specifically assessed how her respiratory muscles had been affected in whatever processes were going on. He did a very thorough neurological exam, which that includes mental status, motor function, balance, sensory exams, reflexes, and a full cranial nerve function test. So he did all of these tests, and by doing all of those tests, he was able to start ruling out specific disease processes and leading toward a final diagnosis.
The neurologist then concluded that she must have ALS because of all the other possible diseases that they had tested her for came back negative. The next diagnosing physician referred her to a clinic that is one of the leading research and treatment facilities of ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease.
ALS is a neurodegenerative disease and stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. The disease involves progressive loss of motor neurons, the nerve cells that attach to muscles and control voluntary movement in the brain and the spinal cord, and is characterized by progressive muscle weakness without notable sensory loss. What that means is ALS affects the nerve cells, controlling the muscle movement, causing weakness in those muscles, and at the same time, your mind and ability to know what is going on, along with your five senses, all of that remains fully capable. The ALS Association recognizes three broad categories of and types of what ALS is. The first one is familial ALS, and that is the type that runs in families. It is very rare, and a very small percentage of cases of ALS are familial. The second broad category is sporadic ALS. It is a type that can affect anyone. And then the third is Guamanian ALS. Guamanian is a type that was found in extremely high incidence in Guam in the 1950s. 90 to 95% of ALS cases are comprised of the sporadic type, the type that can involve anyone. It occurs without any noted family history. A genetic variation may influence a person's susceptibility to sporadic ALS. Understanding sporadic ALS leads into a discussion of the disease features or its signs and symptoms. To discuss sporadic ALS's signs and symptoms, it is important to know that they can be very different depending on which motor neurons system is affected. There are three main systems involved, and those are bulbar, the upper motor neuron, and the lower motor neuron.
It was at that time that the diagnosis was confirmed to be bulbar onset ALS. After almost a year of strange symptoms, she finally knew what was wrong. She was told that she had 2 to 5 years to live.
The specific type of ALS, known as bulbar onset ALS, the motor neurons in the corticobulbar area of the brainstem are destroyed in the early stages of this specific type of ALS. The corticobulbar area of the brainstem controls the muscles of the face, the head, neck, including the jaw, the voice box, the throat, the tongue. Bulbar onset occurs in approximately 30% of all people diagnosed with ALS. Bulbar ALS almost always progresses faster than the other types of ALS, which is why she was given only 2 to 5 years to live. Unfortunately, in her case, it progressed even faster.
Unfortunately, within 4 months of being diagnosed, her health started to rapidly decrease until she passed away on January 5th, 2013, her youngest son's 48th birthday.